Okay, we're going to do a little watercolor demo. I've just got an eighth of a sheet here. It's full sheet is usually typically 22 by 30. Quarter sheet is 11 by 15, so eighth sheet would be 11 by 7.5, I believe. So I always start just a light pencil sketch. You don't want to draw it in too heavy in case you need to make some erasures. You don't have to erase too hard. The watercolor paper, even the good brands, are a little delicate. I use if I do have to erase, I use a plastic eraser or an art gum eraser, that sort of thing. It's easy on the paper. So anyway, I'm just gonna make up a little landscape scene here. I usually start with my just rough in the horizon line. Let's start it that way. So we've got a little horizon line, got a little bit of a, say, a little road coming out here, a little path. And then we'll have a little, one of our little old historical barns. I like those. It's kind of a connection. I feel like I'm connecting to the past when I go out and explore these. I used to go out and take a lot of photos, climb a lot of old barbed wire fences. I don't do that much anymore, but I've got so much of this in my memory that I don't need to use photos much anymore. I just can kind of knock one out. So that'd be good for a little demo. Yeah, I got a couple of little trees back here. We'll try not to let this go too long, just fairly quick. Okay, we've got maybe a opening there in the barn. Usually there's a little loft opening. There's sometimes a little window or a small walk door over here. These kneaded erasers, they're called. They're like the old silly putty. If you want to just lighten something without having to scrub it, you can just touch it like that. It'll peel off some of that pencil if you feel like you've got a little too much pencil in there. Okay, now right off the bat, my favorite part of a watercolor, it's probably what brings me back to watercolor, and I got away from it for quite a few years. And what brought me back is I started teaching it again, and so I'm doing some more watercolor again, and forgot how much fun it was. But the start is the sky. I just love laying in some skies, and that's because we work wet and wet. We can wet that paper down and then run that color across, and watch it bleed across that sky, and that's the most fun part of watercolor, I think. So I'll wet this down, and you'll find a lot of the experience with watercolor is learning the right timing to put paint down or to blot something up. And it's all about how wet the paper is, and you learn by experience how to watch that water dry, and when is the right time to, if you want a very, very loose sky, you want to keep it really wet. If you want a little more hard edge, you let it dry out more or completely, and with the better watercolor paper, it's more absorbent. This is Arches 140 pound. So a lot of times I will wet it let it sit for a minute, and then it's so absorbed it soaks in. It's not quite fluid enough. It'll kind of soak up that water, and so I'll put another layer in there, just because I like that oozing paint that goes on there. And just gonna keep this fairly simple. So already broke a rule, didn't have my blues that I wanted wet down yet, so this paper's drying out as I wet this down. I think I've got enough time, but you should kind of get your paints ready to go before you jump into the wetting the paper. And so do as I say, not as I do today. I think we can catch it. You can see I splattered a couple of drops of blue. Since that's what we're going right into and it's still wet, that's not going to hurt us. If that was a finished part, that wouldn't be good. So, okay, now here's the fun part. And I usually, at the top, most paintings you want a deeper blue or whatever, sky color, deeper color at the top. And then it kind of pales as it comes down, and that kind of provides some depth. And okay, get this just right. Okay, there we go. See, and you just can leave a little white out there, and could be a little cloud formation. Really, you're just kind of freewheeling it. I mean, you can be a little more careful and capture certain types of clouds or a certain scene if you want. In this case, we're really just kind of freewheeling it, and so that quick, we've got a neat little sky, but it's fun to kind of move that. See, let it move around and tilt it, make some movement. And then here, say in the lower part, you want to get maybe a little paler, so you get just a very pale blue, and just put just a little bit down in there. And you can get back into this a little bit, but not too much. You'll kind of spoil the natural flow of it especially if it's half dry and half wet. You'll create these little bombs that go off of the water. I'll show you one of those. They can look kind of interesting, and you can do some effects with it, but for the most part, you don't really want to go back in, well, let's fix this, and that's partially drying. What will happen, the new wet paint or just the water will, if this is a little bit dry, it'll just kind of rush into that, and it'll create an edge, kind of a blossom almost looking thing. And now, if you want to do that, if you just like that little funky look, that's fine. But just be aware of what's going to happen. And I think just to show you what I'm talking about, I'll do that. And if you get some in here in a spot you don't want, you can just blot it up before it dries. And, so I'm just waiting for this to begin to dry, just to again, a little demo of maybe you don't want to get back into it, is when it's semi-dry, it's not going to react well to some new wet paint or just some water. This was a big taboo back in the 70s when I was taking watercolor classes, but you can do it just to, give it a little abstract look or something like that. So let's see if I can recreate. It's funny when you're trying to make something that's a mistake. For an example, it won't be, it'll look good. Everything's sometimes goes the opposite. We'll see here. Okay, so I want to think like this little white hard edge spot. Like, oh, I want to soften that. So I'll put some water in it. So you go in there and you go, oh good, I've got that nice and soft. That softened it. But then you can see it beginning, because this paint is beginning to dry a little. This new wet water is eating into it, and it's creating this kind of weird looking little edge here. And like I said, just be aware of what you're doing. I mean, you may want that. You may want some of those looks like that. Maybe that looks like, maybe you'll fill that in with some green and make a tree out of it. But so here's another. Put a little wet in there, and it just creates a funny little edge. Of course, one person's funny mistake is another person's beautiful abstract technique. So it's just up to you, and that's the fun of art. It's all up to you, and you get to make the choices. It's good therapy. Where else do we get to be the total boss? Okay, so we've got already a nice little sky. Now if I want to, instead of re-wetting it, I can kind of go into some greens and put in some of these background trees. Looking for the right brush. Here we go. And so let's see what kind of greens. I'm not going to be real picky. I'm going to really go more for speed here on the colors. So let's get some of this green. And again, I've got, could have put out some fresh paint. I'm just using some of the dried paint, so it's going to take a few minutes to re-wet it. I'm going to put a little yellow ochre with this green. Gives it a little more of a kind of an earthy look, kind of an olive type look. Okay, so I'll put this in here. Now, if this was all wet, that would really bleed nicely out in there. When it's starting to dry, it'll be a little more hard edge. Now, there's nothing wrong with hard edge, but if you want it to, kind of a soft edge on that those trees, you'd rather that have been a little more wet. We're still getting a little bit of it's kind of bleeding out there a little bit, so it all works. It's just a matter of knowing what you're trying to do, when you're trying to do it, and just gives you a little more control. It's not a medium that you ever really have total control over. And I think you can get frustrated with watercolor if you try to just be totally controlling of it, and you've got to let it. It'll give you a lot of neat looks on its own. You just get the paint laid in there, and so it's kind of a give and take. Now you see we're getting a little bit of bleeding right in here. I kind of like that soft edge. It's just kind of me. Some of these, see how this blue is creating kind of a interesting little starburst, almost like fireworks, one of my students said. So I thought that's one of the best descriptions I've heard. But some of the green is getting up into there. So we just what might have been considered a mistake, it's creating a nice look. So I'm going to stop right there on that part. I like what I've got there, and about the only thing I might get away with, say if I wanted a little shadow underneath, and I don't want to overdo that though. You can put a little red into some green and create a darker green. So if I wanted to, I could put just a little. And I won't overdo it. Like I said, I want to keep it crisp, fresh, and just do that ever so slightly just to give you an idea. In creating shadows, sometimes you need light and shadow, but you don't want to overdo it and get the overall feeling too dark. That can kind of harm a painting. And so just an example. See, that was still wet, so I could put a little bit of shadow. And again, you can do hard edge as it dries, and it still would be nothing wrong with that. But watching how dry or wet that is, you can get in there and get some softer blends. And I kind of like that. Okay, let's get just a little on this barn. And again, I'm going to be real quick. I'm just kind of doing one layer here, and really, in a lot of ways, that's the best way to do a watercolor. Keep it crisp, one pop at everything, and then leave it alone, and you'll get a nice crisp little watercolor. So let's see, what have I got here? I really didn't check my paint, so I'm running a little low, but I think I've got enough just for this little demo. Again, it's important really before you start, get your paints out, decide if you need to replenish your reservoirs with some fresh paint. If you get a bigger watercolor, it's really important. This little one, I'm kind of getting away with it as there's not much area. Okay, so I've got, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch to, this is more of a filbert. I'm going to switch to this flat, because I've got some little sharp angles in this barn, and it might be a little easier to just put a little paint in there. So I'm just going to I've got a little red, old oxidated red color barn here, and so I'm just going to do it. Not going to wet the paper here, just dry. While it's dry, put it in here. And now, since these openings here are going to be dark, like looking into the barn, I can just paint right over those with the red and don't have to be careful. And then I can come back in with some dark and put that shadow in. Now, like right here, this little corner, I want to be real careful. You really can't fix a watercolor if I got that way out in there or something, and that it's done for, unless you can turn that into Barbara say, make a happy little bird out of it. But I don't think a big red streak's gonna ever look like a bird. So you've got to be careful when you're doing a little detail work. They're just I love acrylic and oil, and you can pretty much fix anything that, but with watercolor there's some few things you can fix, but most of it you're stuck with what you put down there. And if you don't like it, then there's not much you can do about it. And but don't be too hard on yourself. You might have a pretty good watercolor and think it's not good, but be surprised somebody will like it. So don't do what I did when I was a younger man and tear them up, because oh, that's not good enough, I'll just destroy it. Little I know, my mom was collecting discarded watercolors sometimes out of the trash can and saving them back when I was young. And one day when I was much older, I came in to her house. She had some pretty neat looking little framed watercolors. And where'd you get those? Well, those are ones you did. I had them I cropped them and made little paintings. Saved the part you didn't tear up. So moms are great, aren't they? That's probably why I kept painting. I had supportive parents. They never told me to stop painting, you know. Maybe I wish they would have, but they never did. So I'm grateful for that. Okay, I'm just going to fill this in. Again, I'm keeping this pretty simple. Now, I used to do paintings, maybe seen on YouTube, very detailed, highly detailed. Took hours and hours and hours and hours. And it was mainly about the drawing and filling in tiny little details. Did that for 15 or 20 years and just got kind of burnt out on it. And but I could make, there were some awesome watercolors, but I like just quicker things now, and like to do them a little easier. And so there's a lot of things you can do with watercolor. You can go very detailed, hyper realism, or just keep them light and crisp. I'm just trying to decide what I want to do with this this roof here. I've got a little section of roof. I think I'll just make it kind of a light, like maybe it was part of the reddish brown wood they used in paint, and instead of doing something really different, kind of keep it in step with the rest of the barn. So here we go, keep it a little lighter maybe, and just see how that looks. My first thought is I don't like that too much. I think I'll let that dry, and then I'm going to darken, put some shadow down in here, and then I'll decide once that dries it. I think I want to go ahead and deepen that a little bit. Just, I don't know, it doesn't hit me real well. So down here, now what I want to do here is put some shadow, just a little bit darker red under the eaves. There's always shadows under the eaves, and the more they overhang, the more shadow. I've got shadow in the door is going to be dark, and the little loft door. Now the thing is though, if I come in here with some dark shadow right here, I want a hard edge where that roof line is. If this is still wet and I come with that dark, I won't keep that hard edge. That wet paper will catch that and just pull it right in there, and it'll destroy that roof line. And really don't want to do that, so I have to wait. Now I've got every good watercolorist says bought or stolen somebody's hair dryer to use. So I'm going to use this obnoxious sounding hair dryer for just a minute and dry this out. Okay, after a second I covered my microphone. Hopefully that won't sound too bad. Okay, so I just want a little shadow line just to define. I mean, you're going to have some shadow under a roof line, so I'll take that red and then I want to darken it, so I'll put some of the green. Those are complementary colors, so they can make a nice, that's what they would, a dark shadow on that red barn would be just a darker red, and you can do that by adding a little green to it. I'm not going to make it too dark. Let's see how this looks. Okay. And then I may, this side here, now I was going to darken it completely, but I don't know. I could just do probably good enough. Okay, now I want it real dark. The little opening you look in that, you know, on a bright sunny day, look in that barn, it's just almost black, but I don't want it really black. It might even look black in real life, but I don't want it to, for a painting, you have to take that artistic license, and I don't want that as maybe quite as dark as it would really be, that opening, because it would kind of steal the show. I don't want that just big dark opening to be too prominent. It's there, but it doesn't, it's part of the deal, but it's not the whole thing. So let's see if I can do that. Yeah, that's about right. There might be a little track there. You can kind of put a little track. And there was a little door here. And that's about right. It's visible, but I don't, you know, you usually don't want to use, especially pure black, a watercolor. I mean, you may, some may be able to do it, but to me it's too strong. It just like, it's like a black hole. It just sucks all the life out of the thing. You know, it's funny, where I can seem to use pure black is when I'm doing like an acrylic large abstract painting, and then it's like you can just throw anything in there. Big, sometimes I've seen beautiful ones that are just black and white, and that's all they are. But a little delicate watercolor, I don't think you want to use too much or any pure black. See, that's enough to get the job done, but here's something compared to pure black. See, it's not, see that, see how strong that, just that color would be. It would just dominate the painting. Okay, now really just want to do a quick little foreground here. I just want to get some color, and then I'll put a little path down it. So I've got to decide, do I want it kind of goldenrod? Do I want to go with the green? What do I want to do? So I think I'll just stick with green and a little bit of yellow ochre in it, and just we'll be finished here in just pretty quick. Again, this is a real small watercolor too. It's best to do a demo that way because you just do it quick. You don't have to hold people forever till they get bored with it. Okay, trying to get some of this yellow ochre. Okay, and I'm going to be just kind of sketchy with this. Let's see what I can just keep it. Going to get up into here a little bit. And basically, I'm just kind of marking it where I think it would show a little bit of the terrain of a little rolling landscape there. And I may leave some spots blank just to give it some dimension, you know. And just pretty quick. May come back with a touch of yellow ochre here and there. I'll decide when I get this part finished. Make some more of that up. Okay, up here. A little for you. Might be a little strong. Let me weaken that just. And it's a nice crisp little watercolor. I could let these, I don't want to do too much of this, but I could just take, I want to just take some more pure yellow ochre. And maybe, and this, I'm gambling a little bit here, because that looks pretty nice, and maybe just a few strokes and see. See what that would do. See how it's eating into the green where it's dried. I wanted to try that, just have it make some have some little reactions there, but I don't want, I think I just want to stop right there. You can really overdo that and kind of destroy your foreground. Already I'm slightly regretting it, instant regret, but I think if I stop, I'll be okay. And so I do want to color this little path, so just almost any color, just some sort of, you know, I could even use just kind of a red dirt type look, so I could just get some red and put a little green in it. And I could let it bleed a little into here. I don't, so I could leave that a little bit wet, but it's already drying up, so. Okay. Really having trouble getting these paints. I was bad and didn't put out fresh paint before I started. Okay, here's a little reddish. If I got too much paint, you can kind of blot it. And okay, just this little path, and I don't mind if it bleeds into the green a little bit. You can leave a little bit of the white paper coming through. You don't want too much white showing through. People think it's a snow scene. Unless you want a snow scene, then you leave it. Okay. Maybe a touch here, just to show that path continues. And you don't have to be real dominant with that distant line there. Sometimes just a touch will give it the feeling, okay, that's the path, it's disappearing. And you want it to look, okay, that's in the distance. Still not sure about this roof. That's bothering me a little bit. I may just put slight, again, this is, you can get this point, you're gambling a little. You have to use your best judgment. I'm going to put a little more color on that. Okay, I kind of like that better. I think when that dries, I really put a lot of water in it. That's going to take a little bit to dry. But, okay, now, I would stop right here, really. You see I gambled a couple of places. I put in a little bit of this yellow ochre. I think I'm okay with that. If I'd have put it all over, I feel like it would have gotten a little busy, a little overworked looking, but just a touch here and there. And that's your job as the artist. You decide those things. And with watercolor, you can't really back up, you know, with, like you can oil and acrylic. And so you got to think about it, and then if you do it, you got to live with it. So, okay, now all I've got to do, you got to always sign your work. This is a little too wet, so I'm going to have to dry it. But well, let me just hit it with the dryer here. Let's see if I can dry it, and then we'll wrap it up. for whatever reason, I typically sign things lower left. I kind of like what's going on here now. I don't think I want to sign over that, so I'm going to sign it over here. I use a script brush. It's real good if you can get handy with a script brush. It's just a long, skinny, soft brush, and you can get, you know, your color like an ink. Nice, plenty of pigment in it, and then some water to where it's running like an ink. Now I want it fairly dark because I've got kind of a light background here, so I'll get some green and maybe a little red. And I was always taught it important to sign. And I came up, play with your name and come up with a little signature. It could be very simple. It could be a pen name. Could be initials. I just came up with a commercial art training, so I kind of made it like a logo type thing, and so I just do a little quick little middle initial, and then just gotten used to writing with script brush. I think that's the best way, but okay. So you're not finished till you sign it. Okay, I'll just let that set before I peel off the paint. Tell you what, I'll just show you, get that crazy blue paint off there, and it kind of helps you see it better. This is just painter's tape. It works pretty good. Used to, we had the old, just called it masking tape years ago, and this painter's tape, basically masking tape, and it just helps hold it down. You know, you get some buckling on the watercolor paper. I could have done it without the tape, but I don't like it to buckle too much. Okay, it helps you see it a little better. Okay, there we go. Simple little watercolor. They're a lot of fun. And this was 140-pound Arches paper, so I think that's it. Thanks. I teach at Edmond Fine Art Institute and Norman Firehouse Art Center. I teach watercolor and acrylic, so if you're in those areas, go on those websites. Thomas Stutz. I'll teach you something like this or acrylic. So thanks a lot.